Good morning. Thank you for being here. And at this time, I'm going to ask Senior Abby Poisson to come up and start us off.
Please stand as the veterans are escorted into the gymnasium, accompanied by a selection from the GHS band. Please be seated. Thank you, GHS band members.
Welcome to this year's Veterans Day Assembly. Since the formation of this country, ordinary people have taken up arms and made the ultimate sacrifice to protect Americans and American way of life. This is why on June 1st, 1954, Congress stated that November 11th would be a national holiday to honor all American veterans. Veterans Day gives us the opportunity to remember, appreciate, and thank the 23 million veterans living among us that have served this country during times of war and peace. Veterans, welcome, and thank you for your service and dedication. Now, Veterans Day Co-Chair Abby Poisson will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand and remain standing through the national anthem.
I pledge allegiance to
Thank you, GHS Chorus. You may now be seated. Next, we would like to welcome to the podium Mr. McBride to introduce our guest speaker.
Good morning. Today's guest speaker is Mr. Dana Dennis, the uncle of senior student council member, school board liaison, and state championship wrestler, his band is right over there, Jack St. Jean. Dana joined the United States Army in 1988 out of Cleveland, Ohio. Dana served 28 years before recently retiring as Chief Warrant Officer 4 in 2017. While serving, Dana was deployed to Iraq 4 times and Afghanistan once. Dana earned 4 Bronze Stars. The majority of Dana's career was spent as part of the 82nd Airborne Division stationed out of Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Dana currently lives in North Carolina with his wife, Tandra, who's here as well this morning, daughter Taylor, and son Tyson. I am told by Jack that his Uncle Dana has seen us in action during a Winter Carnival assembly, and Dana was also able to make it to see Jack win his state championship. At this time, would you please join me in helping give a warm Goffstown High School welcome to retired United States Army Chief Warrant Officer 4, Mr. Dana Dennis.
Thank you. I humbly stand up here and represent this generation of men and women who served, and I'm representing you, and I hope I represent you well, because I'm in awe with the sheer amount of service that I see in front of me, and it means a lot to me to have been asked to stand up here in front of a great student body, a great community, and tell my story, or our story, as you would. Principal McBride, thank you for letting me do this. I understand this is all student-led. It's pretty phenomenal. I've never seen anything like this before. I think it's amazing. So you students deserve a lot of credit. The educators here, thank you for doing what you do. Without you, my nephew, my niece, and all these other students wouldn't have the education that they have, as good as we have it in this free country. And then, honestly, thank you for the choir. The choir was great. Can we give them a round of applause, too? Yep, that was awesome. Very good. And then the band. I probably, I'm not a band person, but you guys are phenomenal. You are great, and you played really good. So I have one question. Is there anybody here that is enlisting in the Army? Anybody out there enlisting in the Army? Is there any hands up? I can't see. My eyes are horrible. Where? Where are you at? Hey, come here real quick. I got something for you. Let me give him a t-shirt. I'm not telling you what division to join, but if you do join and you decide to go to jump school, Here's a T-shirt for you. So you sit right in. All right, before I start, I'm not going to take too much of your time. I know you want to get back to class and all that other stuff. So before I start, I want you to think about one thing, because at the end I'm going to ask you again. I want you to list the 3 most important people in your life, in your head. All right, you don't have to tell anybody. And when we're done, we'll discuss it in a lecture. All right? So I'm Dana Dennis. I joined the Army in 1988, like the principal said. I served for 28 years, many tours, many examples. I'm not going to come up here and tell you war stories. If you want war stories, you can watch a movie or you can read a book. I'm going to give you the examples that a veteran sees every day, and it helps us to understand what it means to serve. There's a big divide between the military or the veteran world and the civilian population, because less than 1% people of our citizens serve. So there's a lot of misunderstandings, and events like this help us bridge that gap, because we're all citizen soldiers, whether we like it or not, whether we're active duty, reservist, or guard. So it's important to understand that when you listen and you talk to a veteran, which I was impressed with in there, you sit down and you ask these veterans questions, there's a lot of lessons that you can gain from that. And that's what you need to ask them. I don't want to tell people war stories. I want to tell people the experiences I had and the leadership that was provided to me, because that's what you get. The young man's going to join the Army. He's going to serve with some of the best leaders our country has. Guys that graduated from Yale, Harvard. I served with them. It's not just knuckle draggers. It's people that really serve. They educate themselves. It's a smart military. So I learned through my career to look for inspiration. I came up in a very abusive family. It was very difficult. My sister Katie can probably attest. I was bullied a lot in high school and all the way down through elementary school. So I have a lot of empathy for what it's like to be your age and how to deal with things like that. But I look for inspiration. But what you need to understand is there's inspiration around you every day. I'm going to tell you a story later on about a baby giraffe, and you're going to laugh, but it's a good story. So I was always inspired by my family. My sister Lori was just elected to the Board of Education in Pennsylvania, because she's not a noun. Lori's a verb. She acts. She's an American, not American't, because that's what we are. We're Americans. Sounds funny, but I like it. So my sister Katie came up, raised some of the most wonderful children ever. That's an inspiration. She broke the chain of abuse, and she did what she had to do, and I'm very proud of her for that. My wife, Tandra, when I was deployed over 60 months, she moved my family twice. Moved an entire household, almost 20,000 pounds of weight, 2 times all by herself. That's a life of a military spouse. That's what you do. Raise 2 wonderful children. She inspires me every day. It's all around you. You just have to open your eyes and change your aperture and your lenses. Sergeant First Class retired Blau. He was a teammate of mine when I taught leadership school at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. He was a homeless, single person. Now he's on that CBS show Hunted. He's one of the hunters. He owns his own business. Inspiration is all around you. CW4 retired Jimmy Phelps, one of my best friends. Stage 4 cancer. Almost died. Almost deployed. A week when I was in Iraq, I got a call from him saying I have cancer. Beat cancer. Now he's living a happy life as a retired school teacher. Inspiration is always around you. Colonel Michelle Smith, she was our chief of staff on the 82nd Airborne Division staff, the first female to ever hold a position in an infantry division in that position. West Point grad, one of the best leaders I've ever served with. Inspiration is always around you. Jack St. Jean, you guys know him, right? Kid that joined wrestling because he thought it was breaking tables and putting chairs over people's heads. Almost quit. Now his banner's up there as a state champion, your state champion, our state champion. Inspiration's always around us. It's always there. You just have to open your eyes. And I give these examples between civilian and military, but it's there. Daily negativity can be overwhelming to us. We hear about it all the time. We look at the Facebook posts, we read the news. But this is where you as young people have to understand you're the next generation. You have to decide your own choices. You have to do your own thing and look at both sides of the story. Don't just read one side, look at both sides, and then you can really be free mentally. Because when you come up here and you talk about freedom, I mean, it's great. We always know the Second, First Amendment, free speech and all that. But free speech means free choice. It doesn't mean just to post what you think on Facebook. It means to get out and do something about it. You know, act. Be a verb in life. That's what you need to do. That will make a veteran happy. Not just saying, I have the First Amendment. You know, go out and do something about it. Live your life like you want to live it. The odds that I wouldn't even be successful were weighed heavily against me. I mean, it was not, you know, if you look at statistics of children that were raised like I was, I probably shouldn't be standing here today. I had a lot of negativity around me. I didn't have any leadership in my life when I was younger, except a few people. I decided one day I wanted to control my own destiny, that I wasn't going to listen to the world, that I wasn't going to stand there and take my past and beat myself up about it and whine and feel sorry for myself. Because one day, we all know it's going to be over, right? We're not going to be here anymore. When I was in Iraq, and this is the only war story I'm ever going to tell you because it changed my life. I was up in Mosul with the 101st, and I was living with a howitzer section. At the time, artillery wasn't that important, so this howitzer section was infantry. And every night they'd fly up on helicopters to be the quick reaction force for anything that happened within the city. Well, I came in late that night. Sometimes I would go with them, sometimes I wouldn't, but this night I didn't go with them. I came in late that night, fell asleep, because normally they come in late. Well, I was woken by my battalion commander, get in the vehicle, so we went out, and I had no clue what was going on. They just needed people out there to help. And there was 2 helicopters crashed, you know, fire, and we were pulling these brave men out of the helicopter. And I didn't think anything of it. You just do what you do. Soldier does what he does. I went back to my room and I waited for my friends, the 8 men that I worked with all the time. And they didn't come back. And I was in denial. I'm like, no, they're going to come back because these are the guys I had served with and I knew them. Well, they never came back. They were on that helicopter. And that next morning, I was devastated. And I know this is a sad story and I apologize, but there's a lesson here. It took me a few years, I realized at one point that I have got to live my life, because if I don't, then what did they do that for? So I always told myself, you have 2 dates in your life. You have the date you were born and the date that you don't know yet, but the date you're going to die. That dash in the middle, you need to fill it with everything you can. You always have to do what you want to do and live life like you want to. Make sure when you lay down, hopefully hundreds of years from now, you know that you lived your life like you should have, because you owe it. You owe it to each other, you owe it to your family, not to be a follower or somebody that just does what the world tells them to do. Do what you need to do, all right? So that dash in the middle is your goal. You're filling it right now, but you know, right now you have the future ahead of you, and you've got to get out there and figure out what you want to do. And don't let anybody tell you you can't do it. Can't's a 4-letter word. That's what you tell them. Say, can't's a 4-letter word. I don't know what you're talking about. And that's how you gotta defeat diversity. So our dash is important. We are not here to exist to be ordinary. None of you are ordinary. None of us are ordinary. I think I read something the other day. The odds of being born are 1 in 400 trillion. That's crazy. That 1 in 400 trillion. That's ridiculous. One, I don't even know how they figured that out. But 2, it's that alone should be enough motivation to say I'm a pretty cool person, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with feeling good about yourself. Nothing wrong with that. Making yourself first, because you're going to fail, and you're going to fail a lot. And I failed a lot. But if you don't grow from your failure, you're never going to understand what it's like to grow and learn and be the person you want to be. Because failure helps us grow. Friction breeds heat, and then heat builds pain sometimes, but that pain in the end is worth it. So here's my baby giraffe story. I was watching Discovery Channel one night, right? Bored out of my head, whatever. And there's a thing about giraffes on, so I'm like, all right, cool, whatever. So I'm watching it, and this mother giraffe gives birth to a baby giraffe. And the baby giraffe's struggling around a little bit, walking like I walk because I'm so bow-legged and falling down. So I thought somebody was making a baby giraffe sound. So anyway, the baby giraffe gets up and he starts to walk around. The mother giraffe immediately kicks its legs out from underneath him. Just kicks its legs out. I was like, what? This got my interest. I'm like, what a mean mom. You know, who does this to their child? Well, the baby giraffe kind of works its way back up again. The mother giraffe kicks its legs out from underneath him. And then they keep doing this, and the baby, you know, at first I felt bad, then it was kind of humorous. I'm like, this is just awful. So the lesson, you know, and it hit me, the lesson in this is you get back up. You always get back up. When you fail, life gives you these opportunities where you get your legs cut out from underneath you. You just got to get back up. I can't tell you how many guys, men and women, I've seen fail in the military and things they've done, but they got back up. They didn't quit on you, and they're not going to quit on you. You've got a private or a lieutenant colonel or a general somewhere watching a border, just watching the border for something to happen because he loves you. He cares about you. She cares about you. And that's what you have to do. That's the lessons we learn as veterans, that you're going to fail, but we don't want you to fail. We want you to understand that failure's good. Because in order to set your mind free, you have to understand your capabilities. And you have to understand what is good about yourself and what isn't. So don't let people tell you that. Don't let people tell you that you can't do something. And when you get your legs kicked out from underneath you, you get back up. So we embrace your challenges, embrace diversity, because diversity is what we see as veterans every day. When we serve with men and women from every different state, many different countries, many different cultures, and that's good. That's good. That's not bad. That's good to have that different frame, those different apertures. So embrace life and be you. So, getting back. So when all of you thought, when I gave you that initial question, how many of you did think of the most important people in your life? When you were, you know, so how many of you had yourself as number one? You should have yourself as number one, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with it's not selfish. You have to love yourself first. You have to care about yourself first before you can do that to others. That's what the military taught me. You know, taught me to take care of my brothers and sisters, but I had to take care of myself first in order to take care of them, just like I did, you know, when I was younger with my sister and brother. So think about that. Think about that when you leave today, about how important you are to yourself. And then what that means. It's not being selfish to do that. It's important to feel that way. All right, so that's really all I have as far as what I wanted to say, but can I just get the 4 student body presidents up here real quick? 4 of you? It's 4, right? Freshman, sophomore. What is it? What's next? Senior, junior, that's it. All right. So it's always important, I think, to lead. You know, everybody's a leader, whether you like it or not. You can sit on the couch all day, but you're leading yourself to heart disease or something like that. I don't know. So everybody's a leader. So I wanted to thank these 4 leaders up here, because it's starting when you're younger. It's so important because they're representing you, and you put yourself out there and you do things for the right reasons. And I think it's important to recognize leadership and things like that at this age, because it's something I didn't learn, and I wish I had that. I had to learn it as I grew up in the military from men and women like these gentlemen and lady here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give them a coin, and it's our 82nd Airborne Division coin. I asked for a little help from the Sergeant Major, and he gave me 4 coins. So what I want to do is, you guys, says thank you for, you shake my hand, it's in your hand, for what you do, all right? Thank you very much. So one more. So if the principal could come up here real quick, Principal McBride. I just want to thank him. When I was here before, he was very energetic and working that little, I forgot what that was called, where they compete. You guys do all the skits and stuff like that. That was pretty cool. I don't know who won, I can't remember, but you guys were loud, and I like that. And then he was at the at Jack's wrestling meet, and I think that's important. But as your leader, I wanted to thank him for inviting me and all these gentlemen here. On behalf, selfishly, I feel a little bit, I wanted to thank the school for this ceremony. I think it's important. Again, this helps with the divide. But where I'm from in Fayetteville, everybody's a veteran, so we don't do things like this. They might do a parade, but something like this is awesome, and I appreciate it. So, gentlemen and lady, for us, I wanted to thank the principal for doing this ceremony and the tradition of thanking our veterans. And before I go, I just wanted to thank you, gentlemen and lady, who served before. I am humbled that I'm up here representing you, and I hope at some point what I said reflects in your lives as young people, because it's important. But I just want to give, this is a coin, it's a Gun Devil coin, and I got one after my first tour in Iraq, and I have a lot of coins, so it's not a big deal to give this one up. But it means a lot. It means a lot. I don't want the principal thinking I'm just, giving him one of my coins, but this is in fact, I'm not going to give it to him, okay? Forget it. No, I'm kidding. So anyway, thank you. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the day. Hopefully you get Friday off. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dennis.
Each year, we take this opportunity to thank our local heroes. Thank you for your service that you have given to our country and to us. Student Council members will now recognize the veterans who are here with us today. Veterans, please make yourself known or stand if you are able while your name is announced.
Lieutenant Commander Peter Galamaga. Lieutenant Commander Galamaga served in the Navy from 1988 to 1992 and was a part of the Naval Reserves from 1992 to 2006. Mr. Galamaga was commissioned out of the College of the Holy Cross and was an anti-submarine officer, auxiliaries officer, and an assistant overhaul coordinator on the USS Josephus Daniels. After active duty, he served in the Naval Reserves with the Naval Control of Shipping, as well as the Iceland Defense Force and the Naval Office of Information in Boston. He was able to travel to every country in South America while in active duty, and was stationed in London for a month after 9/11 while in the Naval Reserves. Today, Mr. Galamaga teaches in Goffstown with the Alternate Education Program and the Adult Education Program. He lives in Bedford with his wife Monica, who also teaches, and his 3 sons. Thank you for your service, Lieutenant Commander Galamaga.
Private First Class Greg Gualtier. Private First Class Greg Gualtier served in the United States Army from 1962 to 1965 in Berlin, Germany. The Berlin Brigade was in charge of preventing a communist takeover of the city of West Berlin. Berlin was isolated from West Germany by 110 miles of Autobahn highway. At one point, routes were closed and food and supplies had to be airlifted to keep residents alive. A memorable highlight of his deployment was being a security guard at the presidential podium on the day when John F. Kennedy made his historic speech, Ich bin ein Berlin, I am a Berliner. Mr. Gualtier is retired and lives in New Boston and has a small business making dog hunting coats and dog beds. He is also involved in canine rescue, therapy dog reading programs in the New Boston Library, and many addiction recovery programs at churches in Amherst and Hancock. Thank you for your service, Mr. Gualtier.
Mr. Bill Rump. Mr. Bill Rump worked as an air traffic control tower operator and also as a GCA, meaning ground control approach operator. Having spent 4 years in the Air Force, he landed planes using radar. During his service, he was recognized for a save where he had acted in a situation that had been essential to the safe landing of a pilot. Now retired, Mr. Rump worked for the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, for 44 years after his service. There he was a supervisor and a manager. Thinking back, Mr. Rump remembers one particular event during his service. A plane with minimum fuel was attempting to land. The station's GCA unit had lost all its radios and couldn't communicate directly with the pilot. Mr. Rump tuned into the plane's GCA via the tower and was able to contact the pilot and relay information to him that way. Thank you, Mr. Rump, for your service.
Mr. Bill Vickery. Mr. Bill Vickery served as a sergeant in the 172nd Mountain Infantry of the New Hampshire Army National Guard for 6 years from 2002 to 2008. He graduated from the United States Army Mountain Warfare School in 2003. His unit went to Iraq in 2004 to 2005. Their responsibilities included convoy escorts, route security, and night ambush missions. They were also involved in the invasion of Fallujah in November of 2004. Now he is enjoying his role as a father to 3 girls and is a working man. He'd like to say that he believes the military is a great place for almost anyone and he would serve again. Thank you, Mr. Vickery, for your service.
Chief Warrant Officer 3, Marie Danielson. Retired Chief Warrant Officer 3, Marie Danielson, enlisted in her hometown of Milwaukee, Wisconsin when she was a 17-year-old high school senior. She trained as a jet mechanic on fighter jets and spent most of her career on the flight line. She spent her first 12 years in California, serving 3 of those years as an instructor training young sailors and Marines to be jet mechanics. After being selected to be a warrant officer, she went to Quantico, Virginia, where every Marine Corps officer starts their training. Her last 8 years of service were spent in South Carolina and Hawaii as an aviation maintenance officer, and finally retired after 20 years in Hawaii. Today she works as an administrative assistant in the New Boston Air Force Station. My mom feels strongly that every person should challenge themselves to serve their communities, whether it be serving their country or their town in some capacity. Thank you for your service.
Miss Kim Ware. Miss Kim Ware served from 1992 to 2000 as a medical laboratory technician. During her service, she won multiple awards such as the National Defense Medal and Good Conduct Medal. She was a member of the 1st Army Blood Platoon at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and she was part of the response team for the Green Ramp disaster of 1994, which at the time was the largest stateside military disaster since World War II. She is a mom of 4 and a registered nurse. She loves animals, nature, and making jewelry. She is proud to be a United States veteran and honored to be a part of this assembly. Thank you, Ms. Ware, for your service.
Richard Kinklade. Richard Kinklade served as a navigator and pilot in the Air Force from 1953 to 1964. He flew in the backseat of a F-94 night fighter as a Rio, then became a tanker pilot. He also flew in a KC-97 in Pease, Portsmouth, and then a KC-135 in Georgia. He is now retired and very proud to have served his country. Thank you, Mr. Kinklade, for your service.
Mr. George Diaz. Mr. George Diaz served in the United States Air Force as security police for 23 years from 1974 to 1997. Through those 23 years, he served tours all over the world. Mr. Diaz would say that some of the most interesting aspects of serving would be meeting new people and experiencing new cultures from places like Korea, Japan, England, Germany, France, and even the Philippines. Mr. Diaz is no stranger to GHS, having coached track and football from 1991 to 2004. He is now a security force manager at the New Boston Air Force Station. One of the biggest honors he's experienced was being able to shake Mr. Omar Bradley's hand, and for those of you who don't know, Mr. Omar Bradley was the last living 5-star general. Thank you, Mr. Diaz, for your service.
Mr. Peter Steckowicz. Mr. Peter Steckowicz was a staff sergeant in the United States Marines. He served in the Korean War and was involved in the helicopter transport squadron. He dedicated 4 years of his life to the Marines in the Korean War. Thank you, Mr. Steckowicz, for your service.
PFC Arthur R. Bergen. PFC Arthur R. Bergen joined the military in March 1952 and received his basic infantry training at Fort Ord, California. After traveling to Korea by way of Japan, he was then assigned to duty in the Headquarters and Headquarters Company, 160th Infantry Regiment, 40th Infantry Division, arriving there in October 1952. At this time, the unit was engaged in active combat against the Chinese forces on the Bloody Ridge, an isolated spot located about 30 miles southeast of the North Korean capital, Pyongyang. His duties included assisting in the regimental command headquarters, acting as a team member in the company's counter-fire platoon, and driving a jeep. In June 1953, the regiment was reassigned to the island of Kojido off the southwest tip of the Korean peninsula to guard prisoners of war. 1 month later, when the ceasefire was agreed to, the South Korean president, Syngman Rhee, released all POWs on the mainland, causing a major uproar at our facility since we did not. In November 1953, he was rotated home and discharged into the inactive reserve to complete an 8-year tour of duty. His service awards include Combat Infantryman's Badge, the United Nations Service Medal, the National Defense Service Medal, and the Korean Service Medal with 3 Bronze Service Stars. Thank you, PFC Arthur R. Bergen, for your service.
Mr. Brad Parkhurst. Mr. Brad Parkhurst enlisted in the U.S. Army in 1967 for 4 years of active duty. He retired as a master surgeon after 32 years of service in the National Guard and Army Reserve. His deployments included Korea, 6 times to Iceland, and 3 to Canada, as well as a joint NATO exercises. He received 2 Meritorious Medals, several overseas deployment ribbons, a National Defense Medal, as well as other awards and decorations. Mr. Parkhurst is now retired from work and is involved with UNH hockey and football, Goffstown Parks and Recreation, GTV, and enjoys genealogical research. Thank you, Mr. Parkhurst, for your service.
Mr. Al Halpern. Mr. Al Halpern served in the Massachusetts National Guard from 1971 to 1977. During his time of service, he has aided the state of Massachusetts for numerous things, ranging from taking part in hurricane relief projects in Newburyport and Plum Island, along with aiding state police during Massachusetts bus protests in 1974, along with guarding the Bicentennial Parade in Boston in 1976. Today, Mr. Halpern resides in Goffstown with his wife Kirsten and his 2 children, Gabby, who is a freshman, and Toby, who is in 8th grade. He substitute teaches at Londonderry High School after 45 years of full-time teaching, and he is the head starter for the New Hampshire High School track, and as well as the voice of the Goffstown Grizzlies football program. Mr. Halpern, we thank you for your service.
Lieutenant Colonel Ken Holmes. Lieutenant Colonel Ken Holmes is the commander of the 23rd Space Operations Squad and has served for 17 years and is still active. His deployment included being a missileer for 7 years, missile defense, and missile warning. An interesting fact was he was stuck underground as a missileer for 70 hours due to snow. He also spent 6 months in Qatar. He is currently in space operations at New Boston Air Force. Thank you, Mr. Holmes, for your service.
Mr. Howard Town. Mr. Howard Town was an aircraft inspector for 35 years in the United States Air Force and a senior master sergeant. He also served in the Air National Guard as an aircraft inspector on 12 different aircrafts. Early in his training, he experienced a crash landing in North Carolina. During World War II, he flew to Africa, Sicily, England, and France for 3 years and served with the 29th Troop Carrier Squad, transporting troops from the 82nd and 100th and 1st Airborne into combat. Mr. Town received the Bronze Star for his efforts in World War II. He later became an instructor teaching mechanics in the Air Force. He has been happily retired for 35 years and he visits New Boston Central School to speak about his experiences in the Air Force. Thank you, Mr. Town, for your service.
Mr. Don Chapman. Don Chapman served active duty in the Navy during the 50s, and afterwards, the most compelling part of his service was during Vietnam, where he was part of the Red Cross. As a member of the Red Cross, he transmitted encrypted messages to the soldiers overseas for emergencies that were occurring back home in the United States. Doing this, he had to spread a lot of negative news. However, being highly ranked, he only had to ever give 2 orders during his time in the service. One of these was when he told a kid from the South that his mother had died. Due to this, he was granted emergency leave, and he thought that he had to bum a ride back to the airport in order to get home. Instead, he went to his major and ordered for a helicopter so that way he could fly him back home. After his time in the service, he spent 35 more years in the Red Cross, 25 volunteering, 27 years as a volunteer firefighter, and has helped with the church, the New Boston Library, and works at the French and Rising Funeral Home. What sums up his service is that he is still on call today after not being in active duty for a very long time. Thank you for your service, Mr. Don Chapman.
Sergeant Jim Morrissey. Jim Morrissey was a Sergeant MOS 2171. This means that he was an optical instrument repairman. He served for the United States Marine Corps for 6 years from September 1965 to September 1971. Mr. Morrissey survived Parris Island and says it was a privilege and honor to serve. He is a second-generation Marine as his father served in World War II. Mr. Morrissey is now happily retired, spending his days with his wife. We thank you for your service.
Ms. Charlene Belanger. Ms. Charlene Belanger was a staff sergeant and served in the United States Air Force from 1981 to 1985 and in the New Hampshire Air Force National Guard until 1991. She is a daughter of Navy veterans. Her main position was as an aerospace ground equipment specialist and volunteered as a crisis human resource recovery mobility responder. Her first base was in Incirlik, Turkey, and then she was stationed at Peace Air Force Base in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. She is currently a paraprofessional here at GHS. She volunteers as a coach with our Special Olympics team here at Goffstown, Team Unkanunik. She also volunteers for the VA and Liberty House for veterans. She says that serving her country was the highest honor for her. Her son, Jareth Belanger, who graduated from the class of 2008, joined the New Hampshire National Guard, which makes him the third generation of their family to be in the military. Ms. Belanger says it's an honor to continue serving through teaching. If there is one thing that she wants everyone to take away from her service and this assembly, is to be kind to one another, especially when our military comes home. Thank you, Ms. Belanger, for your service.
Miss Ann Jordan. Miss Ann Jordan served in the United States Air Force from 1984 until 1987. She was an administration specialist and was stationed at Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas, and at Eielson Air Force Base outside of Fairbanks, Alaska. At Lackland Air Force Base, she processed outbound basic trainees. At Eielson Air Force Base, she worked in the command section of the Supply Squadron. She was also in the Honor Guard and on the search and recovery teams at both bases. During her service, Miss Jordan earned an Achievement Medal, a Good Conduct Medal, and an Overseas Medal. She feels that serving in the Air Force was one of the best things she has ever done in her life. Miss Jordan has worked for the Goffstown School District for the past 15 years and has been the special education secretary here at GHS for the past 7 years. Thank you, Miss Jordan, for your service.
Corporal LaForge. Mr. LaForge was an 0311 infantryman in the U.S. Marine Corps from June 1988 through 1992. He was attached to the 2nd Marine Division at Camp Lejeune in North Carolina. He served with the 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines. His unit participated in the Gulf War during the second part of Operation Desert Storm. He was attached to the 24th Marine Expeditionary Unit, which provided humanitarian aid to the Kurdish people. Operation Provide Comfort created the Northern No-Fly Zone still in existence today, providing a safe haven for the Kurdish people. During his service, he was awarded the Joint Meritorious Unit Citation, Southwest Asia Service Medal, Good Conduct Medal, National Defense Medal, and the Sea Service Deployment Ribbon with Star. He now serves as a Goffstown paramedic firefighter for the past 18 years. Corporal LaForge would like to wish a happy birthday to the Marine Corps for their 242nd birthday on Friday. Thank you, Corporal LaForge, for your service.
Mr. Al Baines. Mr. Al Baines served in the United States Air Force from 1962 to 1966, during which time he served in Vietnam from 1965 to 1966. He was stationed in Loring Air Force Base in Maine when not deployed. During his time of service, he received the Air Force Commendation Medal, the Vietnam Service Medal, and recognition in expert marksmanship. He cites the first time he was attacked at Tan Son Nhut Air Base in February of 1966 as a particularly eye-opening experience. Following his time in the Air Force, Mr. Baines has continued to serve the Goffstown community through his involvement in Goffstown athletics, local volunteering organizations such as Crispin's House, and community efforts such as the Community Emergency Response Team. As a result, he has been recognized by Goffstown many times for his activities here. He has been retired since 2005, having lived in Goffstown for 40 years. He enjoys his 11 grandchildren and currently works for the Goffstown Police Department as a crossing guard. Mr. Baines would like to say thank you and welcome home to his fellow veterans. Thank you, Mr. Baines, for your service.
Mr. Rich Marchand. Mr. Rich Marchand served for 7 years in the Navy during the Vietnam War in both Vung Tau, Vietnam and at Norfolk, Virginia in the Little Creek Amphib Base. In Vietnam, Mr. Marchand worked in damage control doing major repairs on U.S. ships along with 2,000 other men around the clock. He also assisted the men out in the fields and supplied them with medical supplies and support. While stationed in Virginia, Mr. Marchand worked on an LST, which was damage control on troop transport. After his time in the Navy, Rich Marchand worked various jobs, including electronic technician at Wang Laboratories for 14 and a half years, which he considers his best job, and running a bed and breakfast in North Conway, and working with the fire department as a volunteer firefighter for 10 years. Mr. Marchand moved to Goffstown in 2010 and currently retired, lives with his wife. He has 3 daughters and 13 grandchildren who he loves cooking big family meals for. He would love to say that he hopes all the men and women stationed in the Middle East can come home soon because war takes a lot out of those who serve and their families. Thank you for your service, Mr. Marchand.
Mr. Rick Cobbett. Rick Cobbett served in the Air Force from March of 1969 until January of 1973. He worked as an aerospace medical technician in the flight surgeon's office. He also worked with flying personnel and their families in aircraft emergencies. While serving in Vietnam, he worked with the 37th Air Rescue Recovery Squadron in the flight surgeon's office as well. For his outstanding service, Rick has received numerous medals for National Defense Service, his Vietnam service, the Republic of Vietnam campaign, Air Force Good Conduct, and Air Force Air Medal. One of his favorite experiences while in Vietnam included the program he set up to help over 300 children in an orphanage to get the medical attention that they needed. He is very proud to mention he is now happily married with 5 children and 7 grandchildren. He is very proud to mention that 2 of his children have also served in the military. He now lives in Pinardville and works at the New Boston Air Force Station in civil engineering with water operations. Thank you for everything you've done and continue to do, Mr. Cobbett.
Mr. Ed Hannigan. Mr. Hannigan joined the military in 1967. After tours of duty in the Corps and Vietnam, he left the service to go back to school. He used the GI Bill to pay for his college. Once he graduated from SNHU, he came out with a degree in business administration. During his senior year of college, he applied and got accepted to the Army Officer Candidate School. Upon graduation, he was commissioned as a field artillery officer. He spent the remaining years of his career in various administrations throughout the world. He ended his military career in 1996. He now works as a computer engineer. He also is an on-call firefighter for the Goffstown Fire Department. He now lives in Pinardville with his wife and is happily married. Thank you, Mr. Hannigan.
Mr. John O'Neill. Mr. John O'Neill is a retired Lieutenant Colonel, Field Artillery. He served for 41 years, 6 months, and 11 days. Mr. O'Neill was enlisted in October of 1954 as a Private E1. He obtained a rank of Staff Sergeant before attending Ohio State OCS. He went from Field Artillery Basic to Field Artillery Basic Advanced to Command and General Staff College. While serving, he commanded 3 artillery field batteries and 1 field artillery battalion. Mr. O'Neill is retired military and textile industry. He has 12 grandchildren, 2 of which being juniors, Lorelei and Megan O'Neill, and 5 great-grandchildren. Thank you for your service, Mr. O'Neill.
Mr. Jason O'Neill.
Mr. Jason O'Neill is a retired sergeant major. He served for 30 years in Bosnia and Iraq and was enlisted in 1981. Mr. O'Neill received a Bronze Star in Iraq. He was also assigned to the Danish infantry in 1995 and stayed in Saddam Hussein's castle in 2005. He retired in 2011 with the rank Field Artillery Army Operations Sergeant Major, which is the highest enlisted rank. Today, Jason is assisting the ASPCA to help break up pit bull rings and cockfights, and he works at the Animal Reserve League in Bedford, New Hampshire. Thank you for your service, Mr. O'Neill.
Next, we would like to honor veterans with a poem read by Mitchell Skaki.
Thank You by Colleen Davignon. They walk the line so that we can be free. Some stay on U.S. soil, some go overseas, all to defend our freedom and everything that freedom means. They do it without hesitation and while giving up their dreams. When their time has come, they leave to go far away. They do it to keep all of the monsters at bay. They give up their time, they give up their lives, they give up their families, and say goodbye to their wives. We see them every day and walk on by, many without a thank you and most without a hi. Many protest against what they do and all they fight for. Many hold up signs as the soldiers fall to the floor. You have the right to demonstrate because of all that they give. Due to all that they give, you have the right to live. The next time you walk by a soldier and don't even give it a thought, think of all that they did and all the battles that they fought. Make sure to say thank you and make sure you are sincere because they don't give it a second thought and they do it all without fear. Thank you for your service.
Please stand to recognize our servicemen and women who are here today.
Students, please remain at your seats while student council members escort veterans to the senior calf.